My name's Mike Cooper. I'm an English musician, improviser, composer, filmmaker, person. I was born in 1942, which makes me 70. This is the third time I've been in Singapore. And I've just finished a tour which I started in Hong Kong in the beginning of February. I went to Japan and to Australia for 5 weeks. I've been in Singapore for 2 weeks. And I'm going home tomorrow.
Alright, that's good. And at these different places, do you do different things? Or maybe you can describe to us what you did in Hong Kong?
Sure. I went to a sound festival, first of all, which was organised by an organisation called Sound Pocket in Hong Kong. That was for 1 week. And there were various sound artists from all over the world, America, Japan, England, myself. And then after the week festival I stayed on for another 2 weeks, and I did a residency on an island on off of the south coast of Hong Kong Island, where I did a lot of field recordings. The island's called Lama Island. Mm-hmm. And I'd been there before as well, once before. And I did a whole bunch of field recordings around one part of the island, yeah. So, and at the end of the 2 weeks I took 15 students on a sound walk. Right. So I kind of left markers where they could stand and listen and do whatever they wanted. Some of them drew, some of them took photographs. Right. Some of them just were there. Yeah, that's what I did in Hong Kong.
Did you enjoy yourself there?
Yeah, I like Lama Island. I'd been there once before. I did a concert on the beach there some years ago. I think maybe 4 years ago, for the same organisation.
Right.
Yeah.
And what did you do here in Singapore?
In Singapore, well, I've done many things. I've done live music collaborations with various people. I did, last night we did a big band conduction.
Right.
Conducted an improvisation. Tonight I'm doing a talk about my film and video work. And in the Esplanade I did a solo concert and a small talk around field recordings. And I also did a screening of Frederick Murnau's film Taboo, which I played live music to. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. So are you more of a filmmaker or a musician?
I'm a musician, really. I became a filmmaker just by chance, really.
So you started out playing music first?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Professionally? And when was that? I
started playing professionally in 1965. I started playing in about 1962. Yeah.
And when you mean professionally, it's you get paid for it?
Yeah, it was the only job I had.
Right.
Yeah, at that point. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then when did you start your filming hobby, or should I say a hobby? Or?
Yeah, well, it started out as a kind of hobby. Yeah, I started making films in 1992, I think, 93. I was in Russia with Maria, my partner. I bought a Super 8 camera, Russian Super 8 camera, because they still sold the wind-up clockwork ones then.
Right.
And it's actually it didn't work very well, in fact, but I used it nevertheless, and it had some interesting effects because it didn't work very well. So it was a kind of accidental avant-garde film.
Right. Do you still use that more?
No, I didn't use it. After the first time I used it, I realised it wasn't working properly, and I've never used it again. Right. But I subsequently bought other Super 8 cameras. Right. And I've still got a Super 8 camera.
You're still using it?
Yeah, I use it from time to time, but it's difficult now to get the film processed. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I made quite a lot of Super 8 films, and I always bought second-hand Super 8 cameras. And then someone gave me a very nice one, actually. The last one, the one I still use, is actually a very nice camera. I use that from time to time. And then I found a very, very cheap digital camera. I'm going to talk about this a lot tonight in the talk. I found a very cheap video camera in a shop in Rome. It was very cheap. It was like 40 euros.
Really?
Yeah, and it was about as big as a cigarette packet, and it was just 2 megapixel, which is incredibly low. And it was the nearest thing I thought at the time. It was the nearest thing digitally to Super 8
What's it called? Is it made in Italy?
No, it was Chinese. It was
right,
Shadow.
okay.
It was a Chinese Shadow. It was called. I still have it, and I used that for quite a while, and I was quite interested in the low resolution images. In fact, you'll see some of them tonight if you're here.
Right. It looks like Super 8 kind of style.
Yeah, it does. It was the nearest thing digitally, I thought, to Super 8, and I used that for a while, and then eventually the buttons began to wear out and they didn't function properly, so I bought.
Are we going to see some samples tonight?
Yeah, they're up on. I still use those. Yeah.
That's great. So Mike, you started out with conventional and mainstream music, we understand. Is that true?
Well, it depends what you mean. I started out playing folk music and blues, is what acoustic blues.
Right.
Yeah, initially.
As opposed to making experimental, more experimental stuff.
Yeah.
So, when did you first started to get more out of the mainstream? And
yeah, sure. And at the beginning of the 1970s, really, I became singer-songwriter. I was making singer-songwriting records, and instead of using rock musicians and session musicians to make the records that I was making, I chose to use jazz musicians because I felt that they could improvise on things in a different way to rock musicians. And I guess through my association with those jazz musicians, I slowly began to cultivate an interest in more avant-garde music and avant-garde jazz and even avant-garde classical music and electronic music. And then I made 5 records using those people. And then I stopped playing music for a little while and went to Spain, lived in Spain and Germany. And I came back to England at the end of the 70s. And then I seriously involved myself with free improvisation in London and the London scene of musicians. Yeah.
So you started up pretty early with experimental music?
Well, not that early really. I was in my 40s by then, so yeah. When I made those records in the 70s, I was 30. You see, so by then, I guess, I mean, compared with probably people nowadays, I made my first record quite late in life, really. Although, having said that, I actually made a record in 1965, which was an independent thing that a record I made with another musician. We paid for it to make it, and so it was probably one of the first independent records there ever was, in fact. Yeah. And that was in 1965, and then I never made another record until 1968, 69. So yeah. So by 1969, I was in my 30s. So, yeah.
How are you aware of the experimental scene in Singapore?
I wasn't until I came here the first time, and I was probably more aware of the experimental art scene here, performance art scene, because I met Lee Wen and Kai Lam and Jason Lim in Rome when they came and performed in Rome one time. That's how come I came to Singapore in the first place.
Right, I see.
So I wasn't aware of the music scene here at all. No.
And how do you find it then?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. I mean, and it's interesting to me that there's an experimental music scene all around Asia, which is fantastic. I mean, I've played in Kuala Lumpur, Golikwan, and
how's the scene here compared to other Asian cities?
It's very different here to other Asian cities because I guess, for instance, like Japan, there's a longer history of avant-garde music. It's probably more experimental, should we put it that way?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's more vibrant over there.
Yeah, I mean they have the same kind of problems of finding places to play and money, and it's a very small audience as well still. Despite the fact that it's quite well known, you know, as an experimental music country, the audience is quite small in Japan. They get bigger audiences out of the country.
It's also small here.
Yeah, it's small everywhere. It's just, that's the way it is. You know. It's a small audience.
How about in Rome?
Yeah, in Rome we have a huge amount of musicians. I mean, we have enough musicians to make an orchestra like we had last night, for instance, 28 musicians. There are probably about 3 places to play, that's all. And there's no money. It's really small, yeah. To play that kind of music. There are a lot of other music venues in Rome, but they would be rock venues or jazz venues and stuff like that. But for us to play experimental music, it's probably about 3 places.
And it's a small community that plays experimental music. And
yeah, I mean,
just like in Singapore, I guess.
Yeah. About the same size. Well, in fact, what's the population of Singapore? 5 million. Yeah. Well, you see, that's bigger than Rome.
Right.
See, Rome's only 3 million. So, percentage-wise of people that are going to go to any music gig, it's about the same, you know, and if not smaller, in fact. So, yeah. That's always interesting when you go to places and then say, so how big's the population here? You know, and then you have to work out, well, there's only like 2% of the population ever going to go to an experimental music gig. So,
or even less than that.
Or even less, yeah.